Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Patience pays off. I may be the last one, I'm not sure. Testing, you hear it so often. To me, it repeats what we all agree with. I'd like to find out, you said South Korea kind of was the standard to maybe try to aspire to. If there's a test that they used that was part of their protocol, was that a significant part of it, or was it their hygiene, their sheltering, and all the other things that all of us are doing anyway? Because if there is a test that anybody else used, wouldn't we want to have access to it?
Mm-hmm. I don't recall the details of their particular technology, but I don't think it was anything out of the ordinary. It was based upon using this PCR reaction to be able to identify the presence of the viral RNA genome, and certainly the kind of tests that we're doing, lots of those in this country as well. I think it was more the speed with which they were able to set this up, their access to be able to test people very quickly who had any symptoms, and their very strong enforcement of such things as physical distancing, doing this in a country where people were also quite amenable to those recommendations.
Sure.
Maybe not quite as much in the sort of American zone of not necessarily wanting the government to tell you what to do.
Which test and which company would be closest to what they use there that we have here?
Yeah, I think the kinds of ones you see now in companies like LabCorp and Quest would be the sort of thing that you have, where it's fairly high throughput, but it's done in a central laboratory.
So what is the time frame? And in talking to a pharmaceutical company, one of a few headquartered in Indiana, the CEO said that of about 40 companies across the country, that it's been at a breakneck pace to get there, especially for the one that's quick, for a country our size that's going to have reliable results. We hear so often, and we heard it today, that we dawdled, that we didn't get there. I'd really like your opinion, and from what I heard from the people that are actually doing it, they've been working at this in an entrepreneurial, at a feverish pace, and they didn't even have the genome to work with until, what, maybe 4 months ago or so. So what's your comment on that?
I think there has been an incredible amount of energy put into trying to do this testing. I'll just give you a small example. At NIH, up here in Bethesda, I have 25,000 employees. I want to be sure that they're safe. We didn't have access to easy testing for our own employees, and we wanted to be sure if they were coming to work that they weren't going to infect other people. So I asked our laboratory in the clinical center, which is a research hospital, to set up a lab test. And they were able to do that, but the most tests we can do in a given day is in the hundreds. It's not in the tens of thousands. It's not simple to do this.
So it's not that we dawdled, it's the fact that we've got a country that is scaled much larger than, say, South Korea, and that it's going to take a point to get the equipment in place to do it. Is that a fair?
I think that's part of it, and part of it is bringing on board some of these new technologies, which is what RADx is all about, to try to do this at a scale.
And that's going to take time in and of itself.
But we haven't had the need to do this kind of scale of testing. I mean, the kind of testing we do now, even for something like HIV or for hepatitis C, which is a lot of tests, it pales by comparison to what we need now for this. So we didn't have in the laboratory community the kind of capacity to take on this number of tests, and all of a sudden, there it was.
Very good. That answers one question for me. Last question would be, and we've touched on it a little bit here, Senator Romney, Senator Jones talked about it, that idea of the broad methodology, whether we took an approach, say, similar to Sweden, where you let herd immunity be the approach. Yes, I know. Could we have built an iron dome around the most vulnerable in some fashion with better protocol to where it would have been different from a one-size-fits-all blanket approach that might have had difficulties to unfurl in this country just due to the nature of who we are as well? Could we have protected the most vulnerable if we had focused the available resources to where we could have contemplated a different approach, since it seems to pass over so many people in a way where, you know, they're asymptomatic? I'm just throwing that out there as a question.
Yeah, it would have to have been an Iron Dome that was pretty impenetrable, because imagine that if just one case got in there, and then again, with the easy spread from people who don't have symptoms, pretty soon you have a nursing home situation in your Iron Dome. In a certain way, in this country, we've been doing a version of the Iron Dome, which is particularly with vulnerable people, having them stay at home, keeping physical distance, making sure that other people around them are doing the same. It has been, I would say, a fairly successful enterprise. When you see the flattening of the curves that's happened in many places, that didn't just happen because we got lucky. That happened because people went to considerable difficulties, and it did terrible damage to our economy, to try to save lives by this kind of sequestering of people so that they couldn't get fatal illnesses. But obviously, what we really need to get back to where we all want to be is a circumstance where you don't have to do that anymore. That's why the vaccine is so prominent in our minds. And until we had the vaccine, the idea for the testing to identify people and get them quarantined if they're actually already incubating this virus. It's got to be that mix, the diagnostics, the therapeutics, and the vaccines. Don't let anybody tell you, well, if we just did one of those, it'll be all right. We have to do all three.
Thank you.